Hi everyone, my name is Nemra. I am the Director of Programming for South Asian in Sports, and today's fireside chat is with Paraag Marathe from the President of the 49ers Enterprises and EVP of Football Operations. We'll be talking about Leadership Unlocked on how to lead teams both in on and off the fields. Just a little bit about us. So we are a nonprofit community that empowers and connects, amplifies South Asian voices across sports industries. We have executive athletes, and all the ones in between represented. Our mission is to increase representation, create access, and celebrate sports, stories of sports in South Asians. You can use this QR code to become a member and uh, or visit our website so that everything that we do have like quarterly meetups, we do mentorship programs, um, and industry events and more to come. Our next upcoming event is actually our virtual networking event. We have it usually only for premium members, but for November, we'll actually opening it to anyone and everyone. So please register, and that will be on November 25th. And with that, I will pass it on to Adam, who is our moderator. He is the voice of the Chicago Bulls and the Fox Sports broadcaster. So Adam, I'll let you introduce Parag and take it away.
All right, thank you so much. I appreciate everybody being on for something like this. Is a big opportunity for all of us and a great chance to pick the brain of somebody who's found a lot of success in sports. And Parag is obviously very accomplished, not only with the San Francisco 49ers, but chairman for Leeds United, part of the Premier League after being promoted last year, Rangers FC, part of the Scottish Premiership, works with USA Cricket as well, works in nonprofit, and started like I imagine a lot of us did who have any passion for sports. I imagine you had your own story. You fell in love with sports in the Bay Area as a kid and consumed them like many of us did while we were growing up. So I think you and I have all that in common as well. Uh, Quick background to lean into the stereotype a little bit. How did your parents deal with that?
It took about 15 years until my parents and my relatives and all my family thought that I got a real job. And actually, ironically, it was my nonprofit volunteer work with USA Cricket when my family all thought, okay, at least it's a real sport. That's a business. Now you have a job. That's when it finally hit them.
Took my mom watching me on TV to tell all of her friends that I had dropped out of medical school. By the way, I never attended medical school, so that was a fun experience to have. Parag works with Kyle Shanahan, who's the head coach of the San Francisco 49ers, somebody I work with once in a while when I cover games. Works with John Lynch, who is a former colleague of ours at Fox Sports and has been a very successful general manager with the San Francisco 49ers. Obviously, you loved sports. You wanted to parlay that into a career, but you started by doing a volunteer job with the San Francisco 49ers. They asked you to do something with the NFL draft about 20, almost 25 years ago at this point, and you did it for free. It was a pro bono job. Can you give this group a sense for what that job was and how it used the skill set that you had and how your passion for your sports team, a team that you grew up rooting for, the 49ers, how this all kind of came
Yeah,
together to start your career?
totally. So it wasn't totally pro bono. I wasn't getting paid shit, but I was part of a consulting firm, Bain and Company, that the Niners had hired. So taking it back 4 years prior, I like many of you all probably, I loved all sports. I ate the sports page for breakfast every morning. Always fancied the idea of somehow being either a player or an agent. And actually, baseball was probably I played baseball growing up and soccer. Those were probably the two of my favorite sports, but I really loved everything and anything that involved a ball or a racket or anything like that. So I applied for internships when I was in college, trying to be an agent. And so I hit every agent in California. I went to school at Berkeley. I hit every agent in California back then with resumes and cover letters. Nobody got back to me except one, and that was IMG. And it wasn't necessarily representing players, but it was representing companies, corporations like corporate athlete marketing. If Cadillac wanted to sponsor Tiger Woods or things like that, Rolex was wanting to do something, things like that. So that was pro bono, and I did unpaid internship for 3.5 years in college. When all my friends and peers from studying business went off to investment banking internships or lucrative hedge fund internships, I stayed at IMG. And then realized in sports, you either get paid very well or you don't get paid anything. There's not a whole lot of middle class. And so after graduation, I decided, all right, I'm going to hang it up, so to speak, and go into management consulting to at least have enough money to, pay rent and have a few beers a week. And so I went to work at Bain and Company. But fortunately for me, because of my almost 4 years of sports background, even though Bain's not a sports consulting firm by any means, anytime they had any athlete or sport or athletic or sports related client, they put me on it because I was the sports guy. So it started out with Nike, and it was and is still a big Bain client, and or Nike's a client of Bain's, whatever. And so I was always put on those projects. And then just by chance, Bill Walsh hired Bain to work on a project on the 2001 draft, like you just mentioned, Adam. And it was a quasi pro bono project because the Niners weren't paying Bain rack rates, which is like 300 grand a month, or today it's probably 700 grand a month. It was nowhere near that. And that's an important part of the story for a reason. And that's because Bain just loved the idea of having the 49ers as a client. But because Niners weren't paying anything, none of the senior guys put any time into it. And so I was the junior kid on the team. I was 23 years old. This is 2001. And they just said, hey, just go there and figure out what they need help with. And it was great for me. So I would have been layered 3 times. I was an analyst, so I would have had an associate as a boss, then a manager, then a partner. But none of those 3, or at least the top 2, spent any time on it because they weren't getting paid. And so it was great. I was with Bill Walsh, John McVay, Steve Mariucci, Terry Donahue, and it was really trying to figure out the 2001 draft. Sorry, not the draft, but it was really Bill Walsh had all like what the draft pick is worth, the currency value, the exchange rate of a draft pick. So not the players themselves, but when you make trades, like what's a pick worth? And so, it was incumbent upon me to come up with an algorithm to sort of value what a proper expected value exchange rate should be. This was back in 2001. And then the rest is history. So I've been here since, and Coach Walsh and Jed York's father, actually, Jed was in college still. I didn't know him. Jed York's father, John York, and Bill Walsh asked me to stay on full time, and so I had a soft exit from Bain, and the rest is history.
Some of the names that you mentioned, obviously Bill Walsh, legendary coach, Steve Mariucci, longtime NFL coach, John McVay was a longtime general manager. His son is now the coach of the Los Angeles Rams. Jed is obviously the CEO of the team now, the multiple teams that you guys work with in this group. So you're around a lot of high level people, even though they may not have been who they are today. They were still at that moment very, very high level people. And you're the young guy and you're the young person being thrust into this based off of something that you have experience wise. I'm looking at so many of the participants who are watching this. They're large range of ages between students who are going to college to people who are well established in their professional jobs in sports. So I imagine they could probably be linked together by a lot of very similar stories. What was the feeling that you had when you're the young person, maybe a little bit above your depth? Maybe you feel that way, whether you are or you aren't. Maybe you feel that way. Can you give some people some reassurance about being the young person who gets thrust into an opportunity like this and how you approach it to try to make the best impression possible?
Sure. Let's call this for what it is too, because youth wasn't the most challenging thing that I was dealing with.
Sure.
Let's be honest, it was probably the color of my skin and my lack of professional football playing or coaching experience.
Sure.
The NFL back then was pretty much a white and black industry, and doubly was really focused on who not what that gets you into the industry, right? You either played, you had a dad who played, a brother who played, something like that. And so I was 0 for 2. And so the biggest thing for me was everybody, and this wasn't just like the early years or the early months or early years. This was like probably took a decade where everyone just, was very skeptical of me, very threatened or just, defensive. And so that part was hard. But the way I looked at it, I just felt like in some ways I was playing with house money, and that I got Bill Walsh gave me a chance, and that he just wanted to him and John York just wanted to say, you know what, this kid has some interesting ideas. Let's keep hearing them out. And so I just sort of felt like, all right, I got this chance. Instead of saying like I'm going to do everything I can not to lose it, I kind of took the opposite approach. I kind of just said, I'm just going to do what I think is right. I'm going to keep my head down. If somebody wants to blow me out of here, either based on my merits or based on things that I can't control, then so be it. And I'll go back to Bain & Company and be a consultant. It's kind of how I looked at it, you know. And there are many times where I almost also walked away because the criticism was difficult. You know, I was just kind of I was questioned in whatever I did. But and like I said, it took a long time to even start earning some, you know, internal and external credibility just on the merits of my work. That took a while. And so there's a lot of noise in the beginning, and you just got to learn to tune out the noise. And my advice would just be, you know, the advice I give young people who try to get into sports right now, which is like, don't just send a resume and cover letter as the best way to announce your candidacy. Go try to solve something. Go find a solution out there on something. If you want to work in sports, if you want to work in football and be a coach or a scout, like go figure out why running backs are undervalued and write a little white paper on why running backs are undervalued because, you know, or overvalued because, you know, the blocking schemes in the second level create this and that, or whatever it might be. And it actually doesn't matter if you're right or wrong. What matters is somebody now has a little bit of insight into how you think and how you approach a problem and how you think about solving a problem. And somebody who's not threatened is going to say, hey, wait a second, that's a really interesting way of thinking. And whether or not the actual output is right or wrong, that's someone whose mind I want in my office, in my club. And so that's what I would say is just, you know, just focus on doing what you think is right.
You sound a lot like players that I talk to or coaches that I talk to that talk about being very much undeniable, like that, like be undeniable, make them make you make the coach play you, prove that you
Yeah.
belong in some form or fashion. Does that feel accurate to you?
Yeah, I think so. It does, you know, and it's can't play scared. That's probably something else that people say to you, right? So it's like,
Yep.
can't feel like you're lucky to be here and like you just got to hang on to this job no matter what. Instead, just do what you think is right. And if it doesn't work out or you get bounced out for reasons in or out of your control, then it was not meant to be.
Yeah, I know we probably get the feeling that if it doesn't happen, then we should be embittered by it. And I understand the issue of not being included because of the reasons that you talked about are hurtful. They're not right, and they sting,
Mm-hmm.
especially because you
Mm-hmm.
take that personally. But no matter what, if you can make yourself an asset, that always seemed to be something that stuck with me. I wanted to make sure that I was an asset. You could not get rid of me, and if you do, somebody
Yep.
else is going to find me and they're going to be very pleased with the
Right.
product that I put out.
Yep. Exactly.
Praga, I think it's important to kind of get the idea of success and a definition of success for a lot of young people. I think it's defined in a lot of ways. I think for so long it's been drilled into our heads, whether it's parents, whether it's culture, or whether it's the profession itself that we end up falling into, that we end up working in. It's obviously very much a results-based business, but oftentimes it's been drilled into our heads that the bottom line is the most important thing. Can you find different ways, and have you found different ways to define what success is to you, both personally in how you approach your job and then in your profession, in your title as part of the job that you do?
Yeah, certainly. So, first and foremost, being a part of a sports team, success is pretty simple to define. It's winning, or actually, and that's a simple way of saying it, but it's really putting your club in the best possible position given your resources or circumstances for that year, but giving best possible position to have a chance to succeed, right?
Sure.
Because sometimes there might be certain circumstances that prevent you from having a chance, like you lose your star quarterback or something like that. But doing everything you can of things in your control to give yourself a chance to win. That's a sports team, right? Like you can't be in this game if you're not in it to win it. So that's first. I would say two other things that really matter to me, and it's the second one is really kind of why I even love sports outside of just loving to win and hating to lose. It's just seeing how much it brings a community together, brings families together, galvanizes a whole region. When the Niners are making Super Bowl runs and deep into the playoffs, like we were 4 out of the last 6 years, it was just the Januaries are awesome. It's just like wherever you go, it's a spirited conversation of bringing people together. And you go to the grocery store and you hear a kid asking his mom about something about the 49ers. It's just cool. It's cool. It's so inspiring to hear that and be a part of that, bringing the fabric of a community together. My best example is really what we did with Leeds this past year. Leeds had fallen on a lot of hard times, and we went out and I took over 100% ownership and being chairman of the club in summer 2023 in a real tumultuous situation. And what we produced in the 24-25 season was the second best record in the 133-year history of the championship, the second division, to win the league. And we had a parade. We had a parade the next day, and we had expected they were expecting 100,000 people there, and there's probably something like 750,000 people in this bus parade. And it was just like one of the most memorable experiences of my life. I brought my kids out because my girls are young. They're 7 and 9 at the time. And, we came so close to having a 49ers parade and still haven't got it. So I'm like,
Yeah.
shit, I'm going to climb out and let's just have them be a part of this. Just because you just don't get those moments. But I took so much video and so many pictures, because just that seeing what it did to that community and bring that community back, bring them all together. It was just like some of the most incredible days of my life. And so like seeing that community is and bringing communities together is really, really important to me. And that's success is about that too. The third thing for me personally is really about paying it forward. And so what I take really, really great pride in is helping other young people, or maybe now not so young, go and get their first chance in sports and go on to be really successful executives in the sports entertainment industry. Sports, like I said, is an industry that's really about who you know, not what you know. And early in my 49er career, when I was COO and president of the team itself, and we were figuring out how to build a stadium and where to build it and all that, I just decided to start fishing in a different pond. Instead of taking a bunch of recycled sports people, historically people, hey, if you're a pretty good guy, a pretty good person in NBA ticket sales, you're average at your job, but you have 5 years of experience. Great. Now you're a VP of ticket sales at the MLB club because of your trading on that experience. And maybe you're only average at that job, but now you've been in 2 places. Now you're a CRO of an NFL team. Instead, I said, let me throw out sports experience. Let me just go find the best and brightest, whether they're bankers, consultants, in tech, whatever color of skin they were. And hey, lo and behold, women are pretty darn good too. So I also did an uncommon thing in hiring a lot of women. And what we got was a really deep bench of talented executives whose first job in sports was with us. This was about 15 years ago. And it fills me with gratitude and pride that so many of those people are now presidents of teams in other sports and other leagues, shoot, even here. It's just something that, is really special to me. So I'm always looking to help that person get their first chance in sports and move on to bigger and better things.
I mean, you talk a lot about taking some of the emotion out of decision making. The kind of the database things that you've done in your career that's affected you a little bit in a positive way in terms of how you look at the organizational structure of what you're doing. So how do you balance that? How do you balance some of the emotional aspects of this? Because what you talked about the parade with Leeds, just the emotion of the town and the city. And, you can go back to when you're 6 years old and you like the San Francisco 49ers and you're developing an emotional attachment to that. How do you balance that part of it with taking some of the emotion out and strictly looking at some of the data? Because that's how you get to the point where people stop looking at, well, let's just get this person on this track. Let's try to broaden things out a little bit. You would think you'd think it'd be counterintuitive. It's really not. It seems like it's very productive for what you're trying to do. How do you balance those things?
Yeah, it's really hard, and I'd be lying if I told you that emotions don't weigh in and sway decisions and things like that, because they do, and they should, honestly, because ultimately, yeah, you can have all this empirical research that tells you, black versus white or white versus black, but ultimately you got to really have a feel and a pulse for things, and it's just, um, I'm trying to think of different examples, but I was facing a lot of pressure last spring with Leeds because our first season of ownership, we had the best season ever for a club to not get promoted. We came so close, and we kind of stalled and stumbled at the end. And there were signs of us stalling and stumbling this second season in the spring before the season ended in May. And so there are a lot of supporters and media calling for me to fire our manager at the time, and maybe the data was poor in how our run of games and how we were performing, but it just felt like that our manager had a really good pulse on the squad. They were reacting well to him, and that it was bound to change, even though maybe the data didn't necessarily tell me so. And so, yeah, I mean, emotions come into it. I think I wouldn't be in this if it was just purely black and white. If it was purely just a
Yeah.
research project, I don't think I'd want to be in sports anymore. What I love about it is that I still get butterflies in my stomach the night before a match. I still do all my superstitious praying or wearing the same socks or flipping a coin a certain way before every match. I now just have triple the number of games with 49ers, Leeds, and Rangers to stress myself out on. But I get the same feeling, and I hate it, but I love to hate it. And it's just part of me, and it's why I love what I'm doing.
It's the thing that attracts, I think, all of us, whether we know it or not, whether we can articulate it or not. We like watching people who are of the same species do things that maybe we don't have the opportunity to do or can't physically do.
Yeah,
Like I can't hit a ball
right,
400 feet, but I like talking about it. I can't, dunk a
right,
basketball, but I like talking about it. Who was that for
right.
you? I imagine there's a Joe Montana, Jerry Rice kind of connection in there, maybe somewhere, maybe even earlier than that. But who was it for you?
Yeah, I mean, I watched every single Niner game since I was a kid, since I was maybe 6 years old. So I watched every single one. So it was Montana and Young. It was the Bash brothers with the A's with
Yep.
Mark McGuire and Jose Canseco. It was honestly, I have to be totally honest. It was also Bill Walsh. Like
Yep.
if they sold posters of him, at the records at Tower Records, I would have bought one of his posters because I love the team building part of it too. And so he was also one of my idols.
I don't want to have to explain what a Tower Records is, but Bill Bill Walsh also does a diversity coaching internship now in the NFL, which has actually led to several coaches getting opportunities. Bill has done great things for a lot of different types of people, a lot of from different backgrounds, from different
Yeah.
areas of football. He's a great man. So I appreciate you being able to share that with us. I I look at the success of where your organization is at. I've tracked it. Obviously, I've covered the NFL for 13 years, so I've tracked some downs, and then over the last decade plus, really, it's been more ups than anything else. It's been very successful overall. There's a balance, at least when I prepare for games. There is a little bit more of an analytics leaning approach. So I see more aggressiveness from teams on fourth down. They want to go for it more often on offense, even if they're a little bit further back in their own territory. There is with these rule changes with kickoffs, there's thought about field position and how 3 points versus
Yeah.
5 yards and how this is affecting play calling, things like that. There's a lot of nuance to how data is being used. Can you give me a sense of just from your perspective over the years of being in all these different roles and now seeing things from a very top down perspective? Can you give me a sense of how you've seen data play a role, not necessarily making things binary like we've talked about, but how data has played a role in affecting on-field product and then into the front office?
Yeah, I mean, you said it earlier when you were talking about a person's desire in a club being undeniable. Same thing. Data is undeniable, and this is such a supremely competitive business with so much at stake. And especially in the NFL with 17 games, each game has so much consequence and jeopardy that you'd be foolish not to pay attention to any place you can get a competitive advantage. And access to data and access to some of the analytics and access to, players, high acceleration or whatever it might separation, whatever it might be, um, wherever you can get it to build yourself an advantage, you need to do. And there's so much at stake. I would say what's changed is not so much the data and access to data. It's really people's ability to take something very complex and simplify it.
Yeah.
Data was always there, but because it was so complicated or complex, it wasn't able to be succinctly described down to the split second where a head coach has to make a decision. But now, people have taken 10 out of 10 complexity of something that is data oriented and made it very simple and get to communicate. It's just that's what's actually really changed the game, I think. And it's also an arms race. So let's be
Yeah.
honest. Once people see a few early movers, first adopters do stuff and it worked, then everyone's going to go copycat and follow. And so I think that's another big thing.
A copycat league is a phrase that gets thrown around very often. And I imagine that the pendulum also seems to swing in different directions. Like when now you see a third of the league follow a certain approach. Now all the defensive guys are trying to change their approach to swing the pendulum back in the opposite direction as well. So it's a fascinating chess match to try to figure it out. And I do think, again, from just my perspective, I'm the one who's trying to narrate these things and explain them in the most simple fashion. So I might know what pass rush win rate is, but I need to be able to explain that in 1 to 2 sentences to a fan by saying, well, it's the amount of times or the percentage that a defensive player loses their pass, whatever it may be. You come up with these sentences and phrases to simplify these things. What's the biggest challenge in doing that? Is it the amount of data? Is it the complexity of it? What's the biggest challenge of trying to present that when you are trying to make a point to, let's say, a group of people that may have a financial impact on what your organization is going through?
I think it's as simple as you got to take the highest leverage things that you can, the things with the highest impact, and don't waste your time on, just take the top 3. Don't waste your time on 4, 5, 6, 7, whatever. Take the highest leverage, easiest to communicate things and go win at those or go communicate those effectively. And because paralysis by analysis is also a very real thing. And if there's too many things, then you just get lost in the abyss. So really just focusing really simply on just like what actually matters and then go try to be elite at those.
Decision making is, I was talking to a young student today and they were kind of battling with decision making, and they worry that this is going to impact everything else down the line, and if I make this one decision at age 25, it's going to completely derail what thoughts I might have had for how my life or how my career is going to go. I imagine that everybody deals with that, especially the higher up you go. I imagine there's always a concern because there's so much at stake. You have jobs, other people's jobs, money at stake for other people and yourself and the organization. How do you battle through the mental issues of that, the mental hurdles of that? And I know that's a very broad question that probably has a lot of different narrow answers. Can you give me a sense of what that is like? Because I imagine there is a lot of pressure being in the positions that you're in because of everything that is at stake.
Yeah, I could lie to you and tell you that you just focus, keep your head down, and you just do your best and whatever. But yeah, there's no denying that it's pretty heavy because there's just so many people who are impacted in so many different ways, simply on which way the ball bounces sometimes, right? And like we were arguably inches away, fingertips away from having multiple Super Bowls in the last 7 years, 6 years. But we don't. And who knows how many things would have been different if, one of those two happened. Same thing, just, in Leeds or in Rangers right now, we're struggling a little bit. It's early in the season and just we've had to early in the season move on from our coach and hire a new coach. There's just so many people's lives that are impacted. Even in over there with Leeds and Rangers having, a lot of investors with us who came along and just, their trust. I want to prove that their trust in me and us in running these clubs was, it was a decision that was worth it. And that weighs on me every day. So yeah, it's heavy. It's heavy. It's not light. Like there's so much at stake. And, obviously whether it's Kyle or John or other coaches in the league or other players, there's just so much. You can only control what you can control, but yeah, there's a lot of pressure.
I understand that. I hear the word culture thrown around a lot, and almost when you listen to it every week and you listen to a head coach, and we do meetings with head coaches and quarterbacks, and every single week for the games that we prepare for. So I mean, and that's just one aspect of it. I know there's a million other ways to think about this, but I hear the word culture thrown out a lot, and there's a lot of definitions to that. There's a lot of parameters to that. It can mean very different things to very different people. What does culture
Yeah.
mean to you in the organizations that you are a part of, and how do you think you build to those cultures? Because I think there's a lot of people who are in positions of leadership and management who always think about, how do I get people to get on board with what we want to do, because I believe that that will make us successful. How do you think about that word?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few. I'll just rattle off stream of consciousness, like kind of how
Please.
I like to operate and what has worked for me or served me well. First of that, I personally am a very open, honest, direct person. And I want that. I want that kind of culture because there's just no point in harboring anything, holding something back, or you have an opinion, but you're afraid to share it because you feel threatened or whatever else, or yet you won't be heard. So I'm very much about being open, honest, and direct. I'm also very much around say what you mean and mean what you say. And so, I'm going to speak if I have something to say, and I have to be accountable to it. I have to deliver on it. If I'm going to, espouse something, I have to go out and deliver on it. So, being accountable, and that actually means holding other people accountable too.
Yeah.
I'm pretty maniacal around follow up. If someone tells me, even if they tell me in passing, I'm working on this and I'm going to have something for you on Tuesday, just a draft. And it wasn't like the focus of what the conversation, but they just said it in passing. And Tuesday comes and goes, and they hadn't mentioned it to me. I'm going to call them out for it,
Yeah.
right? Simply because I need to know, I need accountability to be a thing in our culture. Another thing is, and this is something that served me well, is that the best ideas are not hierarchical. It doesn't need to necessarily be from the president or the vice president or the director. I think about my analyst self back at Bain in 2001. The best ideas can come from anywhere. So, and the only way to grab those ideas is make sure you're listening to everybody. And so, I really try to have a democratic process when it comes to sharing opinions. And no, nobody's opinion is too small, and certainly nobody's opinion carries too much weight. And so, that has really served us well. And in fact, because of that, I goes to dovetails to the next thing, which is I really, really try to have a meritocracy wherever I am. So that will mean that sometimes I'm going to be hiring somebody to be the CEO or the managing director of a club with maybe no prior experience, who
Sure.
just is super sharp and doesn't barely knows if a soccer ball is puffed or stuffed, but is really talented for the job. I did that, by the way. It's why I'm making this joke at Leeds with a guy who worked for me in Levi for doing the stadium financing for Levi's, then went and worked as a strategy guy at a biotech company that he was a part of taking IPO. I hired him to be first a chief strategy officer at Leeds to work on some of the football analytics and do our stadium financing. And then you know what? He had the best ideas and was espousing the best culture. I said, screw it. I'm going to put you in charge of the whole thing. And probably turned a lot of heads, both
Sure.
inside the club and outside in and around the Premier League. But it's probably one of the best decisions I made, and it was purely based on meritocracy.
I love that answer too, and I love the example that you gave. I again, we talked about the word culture. That's one version of culture. I think another version of culture is another thing that anybody who comes from the background that all of us come from, and obviously with our different gradations of it. But if you come from a South Asian background, there are expectations. There is, again, you can lean into the stereotype a little bit here too, but there are expectations because of what our parents did or where they came from or how hard they worked to get to this point. You even joked earlier that it took a while for you to convince your parents that
Yeah.
this is a real thing. That was the deal with me as well. But what are some of the things of your culture, of our culture, that come from your background, that come from your upbringing, that are truly an asset to how you approach what you do today? I think a lot of us take any experience that we've had in our lives and hope that we can turn that into a positive or use that in a positive fashion. But we have this thing built into us in a lot of ways based on our culture and our background, and our parents and their toils and their struggles and their trials and their tribulations. What is something from your culture, your background that you know is an asset to you right now?
It's a great question. I think the thing that comes to mind for me personally is grit and a succeed or die trying mentality.
Yeah.
Not that I'm actually going to die if I if I don't succeed, but I just have that mentality. Like even
Yeah.
sort of having three different things or clubs to be responsible for right now. And people ask me all the time, how do you divide your time? I don't really even think about it that way. I just think about it as I have three full-time jobs. And there's no hours in a day or days in a week or weeks in a year that kind of limit my ability to be successful. I'm just going to do what it takes when it's needed. And that was sort of instilled in me. I don't know, just from my parents. Same story as probably everybody here. My dad was an
Yeah.
engineer, went to IIT, came out here as an engineer at HP, then wanted the American dream. And we had a family vote whether we were going to do a gas station, a pizza restaurant, or a party store. And my sister and I voted pizza. My mom voted party store. My dad was gas station. But we did a Democratic vote, so we bought a pizza restaurant. 10 years old. I had a lot of, so we ran the pizza restaurant, and slowly my dad wasn't able to work at HP anymore because because Indian culture, we don't trust anybody else. So my dad felt like he had to work there all the time. And so, he lost that and they were running the pizza restaurant. When I was 11, I just had so much family guilt that I started working there. And with the rule that when I was working there, my parents could go home and spend time together. So from age, 11, before I could see over the cash register, I was working 5 to 8:30 shifts illegally, mind you. And I was in fifth grade, and working at the restaurant 3, 4 days a week. Went to 5 days a week through high school, and I just didn't know any different. Like it was just what I did, because it was just to help support my family. And even when I fast forward to when I got my chance at the Niners, it was about 2 years after undergrad. I'd been a consultant for 2 years, and like in the typical path, after 2 years as a consultant, you apply for your business schools, you apply for your MBA. So I'd already applied for a business school when Bill Walsh said, "Hey, why don't you come join me full time?" The essay is for MBA schools. If anybody's in MBA, is like one of the essays is, "What do you want to do when you grow up?" And my answer was always, "I want a chance to run a sports team." So here I was, go to business school and leave this ground floor opportunity, or like go get that chance to pursue the dream that I had. But I was torn because I know education's important from our culture too. And so there was no part-time. I did full. So I actually, even though I said no at first, I ended up doing full-time school at Stanford for my MBA and full-time work for 2 years. And yeah, and people go like, "How'd you do it? Was it intense?" Yeah, I think it was intense. But again, I go back to I don't know any different, right? It was just what I did. It's just what you do. Where I probably didn't have much of a social life. But then even when I think about it, I feel like I did. I had a lot of late nights out at the bars. But I did 40 hours a week of work, and I did full-time MBA program, because I just don't know any different. And so I guess maybe it's grit and succeed or die trying mentality.
I think that's very relatable. I think plus the working behind the cash register. Our my parents own an Italian beef restaurant in Chicago, so naturally you
Nice.
end up behind the cash register and you learn how to make the hot dogs and the beef and everything else for everybody. Um, I wanted to get your perspective on something a little bit more global because again, you're running teams not only in the United States but overseas in the United Kingdom. So we'll get to some of the audience questions here in a moment as well. But I wanted to get like the global perspective of it because what the NFL, I just got back from Berlin covering Colts Falcons game. The NFL is growing at an exponential rate overseas. The NBA I work in, that's already been a very global brand for at least 30
Yeah.
some odd years now at this point, going back to the early 90s and Michael Jordan and Barcelona and everything that took place there. So this has been happening over the course of time. And now you have a couple of teams overseas that I imagine want expertise from American economics and how it works in sports and how this builds up the economic culture of what organizations are doing. How are these things in your mind connected? How are they influencing one or another? How are these organizations starting to not homogenize necessarily, but how are you seeing some of the similarities between what's happening in Europe and what's happening here stateside?
Yeah, I mean, I think honestly, people are sports has never been as popular as it is today. Um, as a fan or as an owner, as an investor, and I think for the same reason, and that is the romance of unpredictability. Anything can happen, and in a world that is becoming much more pattern recognition oriented, and so just that anything can happen is that any given season everyone has a chance, and I think that's something that everyone feels I don't know, just inspired by, and then the community part of it. Same thing as an investor. If you're an investor and wanting to go buy a club or be a part of ownership, it's the same thing. It's like the only appointment viewing that's worth it anymore. Everything else is
Yeah.
predictable. Everything else is rote. Whereas sports is the last place where you don't know which way the ball's going to bounce. You don't know, if Freddie Freeman's going to hit that home run.
Yeah.
But yet you stick around until the 18th inning. Right. So that is what makes it special. And it's why media rights are so good. It's why people go and watch. And it's not just about, and then the community part, it's not just about winning. Just people love to galvanize around winning, but also around talking a lot of shit, right? Like people joke, we joke in the Premier League where it's like, all right, one or two of the 20 clubs, one or two clubs are feeling pretty good. Right? The bottom seven are talking about how they're shite and they might get relegated. And everyone in the middle is talking about how they're in no man's land. They have no chance to ever get to Europe or to Champions League. So basically 18 of 20 are living a life of misery. But it's community.
Sounds like sports, doesn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. But it's community, and people have something to talk about and galvanize around and go to the pub and talk about. And and being at the center of that. Like I want to be in the center of that because I also love to win and I also hate to lose and I also love to talk about both. Yeah. And so to the extent that I can help influence a club or clubs, like that's what I want to do. And so it's really no different. I would say probably arguably in Europe, and even in South Asia, it's a little bit more of a way of life than it is like you get to even though you're from Chicago, you're probably a Bulls fan and this and that, you get to choose it largely. Especially in Europe, you don't get to choose it; it chooses you. It is a function of who your family supports, and you don't have a choice. You look at Celtic Rangers, the rivalry there in Glasgow and in Scotland, it is deeply, deeply, deeply divided along more than just sports lines, cultural and religious lines as well. It is just a way of life. But it's also just tremendous to be a part of that kind of electricity in a community and in a region.
We're going to get into some of the questions that have been asked. There's a lot of good ones here, so we may not get to all of them, and I apologize in advance if we don't. But we have a mental health therapist who works with athletes and was curious because of how you interact with them. Obviously, you have in a lot of ways their livelihoods in your hands and in your organization's hands, but that also means you want to support them in whatever way possible if you do invest in them, and that's both financially and physically and mentally and emotionally. What do you think?
Yep.
What do you think is something that is happening or can happen to try to do that in a better fashion as we continue to advance in what is a very interesting, complex, frustrating at times media landscape, a social media landscape, just with all these influences that athletes have to deal with at times. From that mental health aspect of it, what do you think organizations do well? What do you think you guys do well? What do you think can be done better to help shepherd athletes in those directions?
I think that at least speaking in the NFL, like it's been really great to see the amount of resources put into really helping mental health, not just of players, but coaches as well, because there's just so much pressure. There's so much on the line every minute. And the stakes are so high that, of course, there's going to be just this, it's like a nuclear power plant at every franchise. And so we've devoted so many good resources to people having full-time staff, full-time psychiatrists, full-time psychologists. And, everyone's human, right? I mean, you think
Yep.
we talk about it a lot where the faceless fan who is the most vitriolic. The
Yep.
faceless fan who can hide behind social media and make all crazy comments about a player who failed in something is so much more incendiary and inflammatory. Whereas if you actually meet the person and face to face, like there's actually context and they suddenly are amazingly suddenly more empathetic, right?
Yep.
And so it's just, recognition. There's been a recognition, at least within clubs, within leagues, inside, not to say yet outside, that these are all human beings with feelings, right? And they're also doing their
Yep.
best. There's so much at stake, and also a lot of elite athletes. There's a lot of people relying on them too. Their friends, their family, for financial support and well-being, and a lot of things. So there's a lot of pressure that they face day in and day out. And so really just trying to help them where this is just a train stop in the longer life that they're going to live. And so helping set them up for whatever they're going to do beyond the 1 to 10, 15-year career they're going to have in life is really important.
That speaks to the culture aspect of that as well, what we were discussing earlier. And it's hard to hate people up close too. It seems to be a common theme as well.
Yep.
Kind of wanted to see if we could get some of your expertise. It's an interesting media landscape. There's more conglomeration than maybe we've seen in years past. Right now Disney and Google and YouTube are going through their own issues in terms of carriage rates. Like there's a million things from a lot of different angles in terms of how this is taking place. But when you have big mergers, whether it's media companies, whether it's organizations, whether it's one ownership group starting to take hold of multiple properties in different sports, how does this impact what you guys do on a business side? How does this impact what you guys look at in terms of content distribution? Does it affect you guys, or do you still feel confident that because you're the product, that will get figured out, and then we'll kind of fill in the gaps where need be? How does this affect kind of the business end of what you guys do?
To be honest with you, because when you're a part of some, premium leagues that have good infrastructure and overhead, you just focus on doing the best you can to win and know that,
Yep.
In the NFL's case, there's such a tremendous leadership at the top, and they're going to figure out to doing the best possible deals. Now, different things that we may have been a part of, building new leagues or investing in new leagues, then obviously you got to think about how to grow that as well. And so, but for the most part, whether it's the Premier League, even the Scottish Premiership or the NFL, there's really good organizational infrastructure at the top to help drive that. But you're right, it is viewership is at an all-time high because there's just that romance that I talked about is what makes sports special.
I know we touched on this a little bit, but how do you take that part of it, the emotional part of it, and actually transition that into business success? And I hate almost latching these two things together because it makes it seem like you're being cold about something that should be treated so gently. And it seems like you do. You treat this with care and with empathy because you understand what it means to be a kid who wants to see their team win, or an adult who's suffered through long losing stretches and wants to have some of that joy that we were talking about. But that's what makes it great. How do you transition that into the business side of it? How do you, I don't even like saying take advantage. I think it's trying to lift it up a little bit while it can still be beneficial for a lot of organizations, for a lot of people in the organization. How do you do that? How do you try to balance those two things? Because it's an interesting dichotomy between the two.
Oh, wait, I'm sorry. Balance what and what, Adam?
Kind of balancing the emotional aspect of what sports is with the business side of it, with the economic windfall that takes place for the city, for the organization, for the people that are part of it.
Yeah, I mean, you need to do everything you can every year to try and set your team up for the best chance it can have, right? Because that ultimately, what is the currency for fans and supporters? The currency is hope. Every
Yeah,
year they need to have hope, and that's an emotional thing, like you talked about. That's the key core currency is like they have hope. If fans of a club go into a season without any hope, and by the way, hope doesn't necessarily need to mean winning a title. Hope
right.
could mean, hey, maybe our team has a chance to go get Peyton Manning next year when he
Sure.
comes out of Tennessee, right? That's also hope.
Yeah.
But you just got to have some kind of hope, and as long as you build that confidence and build that sort of everybody galvanized over, whatever that thing is you're hoping for, then the rest sort of takes care of itself. I don't think I've ever really looked at it where I'm like, all right, what do we need to do to sell tickets? Will this coach for hiring this coach versus that coach help us sell tickets, or signing this striker versus that midfielder help us sell tickets better? I just look more at what are we doing to give us our best chance to succeed, and the rest will take care of itself.
Process based, it feels like. I
Yeah,
think trusting a process of some sort has always been. I used to cover Nick Saban, and he always used to use this word, and it
yeah,
felt like a buzzword at times. But I think when
yeah.
you understand the meaning behind it, where process leads to the results, and then once you have results, everything else seemingly takes care of itself. Has that been your experience with San
Yeah,
Francisco?
there's a famous 2x2 that I even keep in my office, process and result. And the easiest thing to be seduced by and the biggest trap is bad process, good result, because
Mm,
that's just dumb. And inside that little 2x2 box, it's dumb luck, right?
not
And it's very
sustainable, right?
seductive. It's
Yeah.
very seductive because it's like, man, the shit worked. Um, but you can't, you can't. And good process, good result is the under that box or in that box is justified success, deserved success, right? But an equally good box, but underappreciated is good process, bad result.
Excellent.
Because you had all the right treasure maps, you put in all the right tools, the ball just didn't go your way, bounce your way. And you have to believe as long as you have core objective belief, confidence in your process, then over time the results are going to come.
Pranav Malapudi has a question he wanted to ask. We figured we'd let a couple folks ask some questions directly. So, Pranav, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Adam. Hi, Parag. Thank you for coming in today. Um, uh, Ironically, I've also worked at Bain for a couple of years, and then now I'm pivoting into the sports industry. So I just wanted to
Great.
ask you, like, what are some of the skills that you've learned in consulting that were helpful enough for you in the sports industry? Like, what were some things that you just carried forward in to this industry?
One that kind of speaks the most loudest to me is um, being able to synthesize and take something complex and make it in a succinct communication. So I think taking a complex problem and being able to crystallize it in an effective way. I always talk about when I'm at sports analytics conferences that I'd much rather have a 6 out of 10 piece of analysis that's communicated in a 10 out of 10 way than a 10 out of 10 piece of analysis that's communicated in a 6 out of 10. So my consulting background really helped me figure out how to distill something down to its core pieces to communicate it effectively. I think the other one is probably just really focused on results being results, process and results driven, like process driven, results focused. That's what I meant to say. And so really focus on like, how are we thinking about this? Not just what happened. Those are probably the two that really speak to me the loudest.
Got it. Thank you so much.
Pranav, thank you. Rohit Ahuja, you have a question as well.
Hello. Hi, Parag.
There
Nice
you
to
are.
meet you. Sorry, I
Nice to
also
meet
have a
you.
passion for football operations. My one question regards to how you split responsibilities with John Lynch. I worked a little bit at Athletes First, so I know we had a contract negotiation with you guys in the Niners, and I know that you handle most of the negotiation. But how do you work the numbers through when you have somebody like John Lynch, who's the general manager, but who also shares the agent of Ryan Williams at Athletes First, who coincidentally
Yeah.
reps, Brandon Ayuk, over the course of those negotiations?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's a partnership. Like we work great together. We're great friends. His office is next door to mine. And we just sort of, even like when you say share responsibility, we don't even think about it that way. We are just focused on doing what's best for the team. Whether that means I take the next 15 calls and meetings or John takes the next 15 calls or meetings, it doesn't matter. Whatever it takes for us to, be as successful as we can be. Fortunately, we're very close, and including with Kyle in the off season, we just do it together. And so I really don't think about it in terms of that I have 20% of it or 80% of it. We do it together.
But are there not some times where he might be like edging you for a player or something where you might have to push back on, or does that not
It
ever?
happens all the time, or vice versa.
Okay.
My expertise is in value, and salary cap and all that. His expertise obviously is in scouting and understanding, what makes a player tick, both mentally and physically. And so, we push each other, and ultimately, we each have different areas of expertise, and yeah, we'll debate. And sometimes maybe we don't agree, and we got to get to Jed and get Jed's involvement on, hey, what do you think? Here's where we're at.
Thank you.
Thanks for the question. We have time for one more. Miles has a question for you, Parag, as well. So, Miles, go ahead, bud.
Appreciate you, Adam. Parag, I actually used to work for the 49ers back in the day. So I think we probably
What day?
what day? It was the 2018 off season. So right
Okay.
after Jimmy signed that big deal. But no, pleasure to connect with you again. I have a bit of a convoluted, question on my end. So from a 49ers enterprise side, how do you guys go about your vetting process when it comes to, finding soccer clubs to invest in? And are you guys like, do you envision it as more of a Harris Blitzer route, going forward, or is it just going to be international, or are you looking for potential clubs stateside as well?
So yes and yes is the short answer, but basically it's not necessarily like limited to sport even
Mhm.
or region. It's really just like what are the best opportunities for us, to be able to have an impact and turn around a club. What I'll tell you, at least based on history so far, what we've done, where we found the biggest opportunity for impact is taking um, clubs that are effectively like sleeping giants that have a rich storied history, and by virtue of that success, they have a global fan base, but they maybe fallen on hard times. It's kind of similar to when I started at the Niners in '01, right? We had all that success in the '80s and '90s, fell on hard times, but by virtue of those 5 Super Bowl trophies, we had this global fan base around the world, and someone just needed to, just restore that luster. And so that's similar to Leeds United and similar to Rangers, of by virtue of success that they had, both clubs in the '70s and '90s, and even in the early 2000s. So much success, have fans in Australia and the Netherlands and Asia, everywhere, not just home country. And so if you could just, polish up that diamond, the potential is so enormous. And I'd say the other thing is like where we can actually have a real impact. So instead of just being passive investors in something, like really being able to implement this same playbook that I implemented at the 49ers over, 20 years ago, and doing the same playbook. Because as much as people try to make sports complicated, it's really not that complicated. It's hard to do, but it really just comes down to 3 things: winning on the pitch, on the ice, on the court, on the field, whatever, monetizing, selling tickets, sponsorships, all those things, and having a good story to tell and telling a good story. So that's where the history of success and being able to tell a good story that brings the community together is really important. And if you could do those 3 things, you could make any club successful.
We should talk because I actually have a soccer team that's coming to Jersey, and we're trying to build that thing up. But and it's being announced in Times Square, I believe, next week. So if you have any
Awesome.
interest.
Okay, great.
Good stuff, Miles.
Appreciate it, Adam. Thanks again, Parag.
Yeah, of course.
This was a wide-ranging and eye-opening conversation in a lot of ways, man. And it's great to see somebody, again, background, culture, everybody that's a part of this can at least feel some connectivity to it, and then to hear you speak about the broad range of topics and how they all kind of connect to where you come from and how you think about things. It's really appreciated. I hope you understand that that's very much appreciated from everybody that was a part of this. So thank you, Parag.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you, Adam, for taking the time. I had a good time.
Thank you so much. Nimra, I'll kind of leave it with you to how you want to close this out.
Yeah, sure. So thank you everyone for joining. Again, please visit our website if you're interested in becoming a member. And from there, we have more fireside chats to announce soon. So keep a lookout. Thanks again, everyone, and see you soon.
All
Thank you
right,
so
take
much,
care.
everyone.
Thanks, Parag.
Thank you, Parag.
All right, take care.